Carissa. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited that you invited me to do this with you.
Me too. Uh, it's just so many people are having a difficult time. We're all in isolation camp here and feeling a plethora of different emotions. I thought it would be useful for people who are stuck in their homes, even if they are, using teletherapy to see their own therapists, to maybe
Sure.
hear a little bit about what are some of the common themes that are showing up in your office or on your computer, I should say, because everyone's doing teletherapy right now. And just a little bit about how you work in general. Let's start first by maybe you introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your work, what you specialize in, and
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love that. So, I'm part of a group practice that's located in downtown LA called Golden Hour Therapy. And as you said, because of the COVID pandemic, we, as most all therapists, have converted to telehealth.
yeah.
And I work a lot with, emerging adults like students at USC, young professionals in the downtown area who are struggling with things like stress, life adjustments, relationship issues, as well as things like depression, anxiety, trauma, substance abuse. And I use acceptance and commitment therapy, which I know that you're very well familiar with. I actually learned a lot about ACT from you at Pepperdine, so thank you for that.
My pleasure.
It's cool to come back around and now to be kind of talking with you in this way about acceptance and commitment therapy. But if the viewers are not as familiar, it's kind of the integration between mindfulness and acceptance based interventions. So really kind of accepting our emotions for what they are, using mindfulness to get some perspective or distance from our thoughts, not getting completely lost in them, and really kind of finding ways to engage our values. So before we started the broadcast, we were sharing a little bit about, for us, this is kind of an example of valued action for us, is finding ways that we can, try to help support people during this especially difficult time.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks for highlighting that. That is why we're doing it, right? And so that is the goal here. That is the goal. And I'm going to try to do more of these talks where we can just bring in people who are familiar with the skills, who can share some new insights about it, and to hear a little bit from other people. That's why I like this technology. I was hoping to really hear what other people are experiencing and how we might be of service in this way. That is our valued action. Exactly. And you have a book out, right? That just came out this year, I think?
Yeah, so it
Nice.
came out this year in January, and it's all about acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a self-help book, but it's also something that you could use along with a therapist. I've been using it along with some of my clients who are interested in it. If you're wanting a little bit more structure to your sessions, and it really kind of just walks you through each of the 6 core ACT processes
Nice.
to help you learn how to deal with the things that might be showing up in your life.
Um,
Yeah. And I
yeah.
think it's so applicable to this time in particular, that balance that you're talking about between
Yeah.
acceptance and commitment, because I think we're all kind of as a, global community experiencing something that is so outside of our control, that really, I think we just kind of have to practice this radical acceptance around, while also, finding ways to engage the things that are valuable and meaningful to us, the things that are within our control that we can work on even during this pandemic.
Have you noticed any themes or anything in your practice that are showing up in terms of where people are getting stuck in that struggle? And
Sure. Yeah, it's so interesting to see the wide array of the responses to this, right? So like I have, some clients who it's actually been kind of almost a positive thing for them, the way that
nice.
it's impacted them. Like maybe it's helped them to slow down. Maybe they kind of needed the world to slow down in order to give permission to themselves to slow down. Or maybe it's helped them to kind of practice actually acceptance of uncertainty, or gratitude, reconnecting with people that they really care about, reconnecting with the things that they really value. I think sometimes a crisis can do that, is really kind
Hmm.
of put things into perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's, of course, a lot of difficulties that have come along with the pandemic as well. People that are isolated, kind of sheltering in place alone, people that are experiencing stress related to unemployment, and people who are, I think uncertainty is one of the most difficult things to deal with. And even if you're really working on practicing acceptance of that, I think it's a real challenge
Well,
that
I
this
think,
is
yeah,
as
I
well.
talk about that a lot, and almost my entire values chapter is around acceptance of uncertainty, because my book was aimed at young adults, right? And when you're starting out life, there's a lot of uncertainty, decisions
Yeah.
to be made and changes and things like that. And I stumbled upon really interesting research that just shows how much humans despise uncertainty. There's this very funny research study where they randomly assigned people to two groups, and then they said, so we can either leave you in a room here to ponder your thoughts and just, not know what's going to happen. And I think they might tell them something's going to happen, but you just ponder your thoughts and sit here alone and contemplate. Or we're going to give you an electrical shock every period. And people preferred the electrical shock because at least they knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, I think people find a lot of safety in certainty. And like the thing is, we never really have certainty, but
It's an
sometimes,
illusion.
yeah, we think that we do. And
Yeah.
it makes us feel safe. And so I think it highlights all those feelings of vulnerability that come up during this time. And, with all of the health concerns, especially, like it really brings up this fundamental vulnerability that we have as human beings to death.
You also brought up the important part about socioeconomic differences, right?
I think that's another thing that this pandemic has really highlighted, and it will be interesting to see as we come out of this over time, how that will shift things. I really do think it is like a generation defining, pandemic that we're experiencing, and that there's not going to be this like return to normal that people really want, maybe because of that certainty that it's really going to kind of redirect or shape things. But yeah, I think that particularly people of lower socioeconomic status are being hit by this in a very different way, whether that's that they don't quite have the option to maybe shelter in place, like if they're driving a bus, for example, or if they're janitorial staff, cleaning staff, grocery store clerks, right? Like people that are just like healthcare workers in a way, like on the front lines of this, that are not able to just kind of stay home and take care of themselves. People that I think are experiencing a lot of very valid anxiety at this point.
Right. And that's a big thing that we do in the acceptance and mindfulness-based therapies, right? We talk about the validity of emotions, and also linked to you saying that this is going to be a generation defining moment, right? My generation, which is before your generation, my generation and before, or even going back to, I talk about my husband's mom is a Holocaust survivor, right?
Oh, wow.
So we're like very like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, put that emotion down, push through, overcome, right? Which is kind of addicting, right? Because getting masterful and hurdling all of those things that come up can be very tempting. But we're more in a. But when you do that too much, so that would be a change strategy. When you are too good at hurdling your emotions for too long, and then you're faced with something where you are genuinely supposed to be anxious right now.
Right, exactly. I think a lot of people, we have a lot of discomfort around uncomfortable feelings like anxiety, and we want to get rid of it. But I think what sometimes people overlook is like we should be anxious and not panicked, right? We don't want to panic where we're not kind of thinking clearly anymore. But the anxiety is what's going to motivate us to take these measures that are going to help protect us and keep us safe and keep our communities and our loved ones safe as well, right?
Right. So that's the really important point here, right? That our emotions connect us to what we are actually supposed to do to get our most important needs met. In this case, the anxiety says, wear your mask, wash your hands, don't touch your face. That one is so hard for people because us humans are so automated, right? Do you have any particular, and if you don't, I can jump in because I've been thinking about this sort of teetering in our minds, right? Between I'm aware that there's something scary, but I'm not like glomming into it and just, panicking and chewing and perseverating on it versus stepping back from the thinking. So that is really what we're after, right? Is how can I be aware of the things that are causing me anxiety and not get so attached to those thoughts that I can't be productive and stay in the present moment.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. So I'm actually working right now, another example of valued action, on creating a series of ACT videos aimed at healthcare providers using kind of, the 6 core processes of ACT. And the first video that I shot was on diffusion. And I had a really hard time actually kind of like presenting it clearly, because there's that balance that you're talking about between, like you should be really kind of scared, like you're in the trenches of this and you're exposed to people with this virus. Your feelings are totally valid, but see if instead of I use the example of like getting sucked into a stream of thoughts, see if even as, it's not that your thoughts are distorted or unrealistic in any way, and your feelings also are valid, but see if you can just get out of the stream and step to the shore or the bank, so that you can just kind of notice the thinking and say, I'm having all these thoughts about my risk of exposure, and not just getting carried away with them in a way that's kind of heightening your anxiety, so that it's maybe at a level where it's not usable. We want to be able to kind of notice our emotions and use them effectively, as opposed to getting lost or swept up in our thoughts, and kind of amplifying our emotions in a way where we can't use them anymore.
So here would be what my suggestions would be for practices for people, like, because I'm very big on how, right? It's, there's the internet is inundated with information about what. Exercise, meditate, take a bath, right? But I'm very big on the how, and on top of that, doing that little functional analysis, as we call it, like that self-evaluation of what's getting in the way of my commitment to doing the things that are effective in my life. For this thing, you mentioned cognitive diffusion. So for our watchers, cognitive diffusion is the skill of being able to step back from your thoughts and see thoughts as thoughts rather than facts. So an ongoing practice would be our leaves on a stream meditation, right? That's a simple meditation. There's one, is it on my website yet? If it's not, I can post it soon. Yes, it is, actually, where you just watch your thoughts come and go, and you practice that activity of you're meditating. Oh, here are thoughts I'm thinking about. I can't believe he did that. Da, da, da. Oh, thought. And you visualize it, letting it go. But a great one in the present moment, like a non-meditative one, is the old sentence prefix. So you say, oh my God, this is really bad. It's terrible. It's going to be a long time. How long am I going to be? And you say, I'm noticing I'm having the thought that this is going to be terrible and it's going to last a long time. So if you start your sentences and your thought sentences like that, I'm noticing I'm having the thought, just gives you that stepped back space that can be super helpful. I mean, even when I get I have to walk myself through these skills too.
Totally, because I think especially with an emotion like anxiety and fear, it's really easy to let that take hold and like to just get lost in these kinds of thoughts that can be so powerful. So that active diffusion of just even saying I'm noticing, that I'm having these kinds of thoughts can help give that distance or perspective.
Are your clients, so do you actively, since I'm also more DBT-ish, and I tend to lean heavy on change, which can be very annoying for people. I came in as like hardcore CBTer before.
I think it's really important that we do have that change piece or the commitment piece to help people move forward towards the things that they really value.
That's sort of the beauty of the kind of behavioral therapy-based therapies, that it's not just an endless, we have goals in the place between the commitment, like the saying of the commitment and the doing of the commitment. Do you notice any particular themes of what is it that gets in the way when someone comes back week after week, or 1 week at least, without and not doing what they
different things, right? So like I mentioned that I work with people with substance abuse, and we've been talking about uncertainty, right? And like the comfort that certainty gives people. And that's one of the things that can actually be a barrier at times, is like people will talk about not wanting to change, even though it would be a positive thing in their life, because they're comfortable with the familiarity of kind of the way that they're currently living, or something about their current experience. And the reason I bring up substance abuse in particular is because like sometimes people will say things to me like, I don't want to start to feel good about myself, or I don't want to see myself as a better person, or sometimes people are very fused again with this negative way of seeing themselves.
So the self as concept part of ACT.
Exactly. Totally. Yep.
So that's really interesting. And I think an often overlooked part of the acceptance commitment therapy work is how, if I identify myself as I was the troubled child who got in trouble, or I was the one I'm the screw up.
Yeah.
Reminds me of a story a close friend of mine told me not long ago. I'm the screw up. So then behaviors that aren't consistent with being the screw up are that much more challenging, because it's almost an invalidation to themselves
Right.
if they don't keep showing up that way. So I invite people watching, if you're interested, to ask yourselves, what are my self concepts? Fill in the blank. I am the kind of person who, right? Or I am and take a self look at how that might be getting in the way of who you want to be, how you want to walk through this period, because this is a life marking period. We will all reflect on this as, remember the pandemic, just like Ruben's mom remembers the war, or tries not to, and asking ourselves, what do I want to say about myself after? How did I walk through this big challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. I think working on, but yeah, I think that attachment to the conceptualized self is one of the biggest barriers. Or another example it brings to mind is I have had some clients who have seen this as like an opportunity to work on projects, they're going to start their writing that they've been talking about for so long.
Exactly.
But then those passengers of inadequacy show up, or they're, really kind of fused with the I'm not good enough.
Right.
And so the same stuff kind of shows up.
Yeah, I've long said, my master's degree is in psychophysiology of the stress response. So I've always talked about how stress will bring those passengers up. And so for our viewers, the passengers metaphor is a core metaphor in acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's like a foundation in my book, because I talk about I added the part about mind, body, vehicle. Your passengers are your learned experiences over time, from all of your good days, bad days, traumatic days, and special days, where you've accumulated ideas about how the world works, thoughts and feelings and bodily sensations. It's everything that goes on inside your skin. And they become sort of calcified in us as we go along on the road of life, and then stress will trigger those old passengers, which are things like self-concepts, beliefs, feelings, and things that really scare us and make us act not consistent with the adult person we want to be. And so really getting skillful at the end of the day, in my view, is making nice with your passengers. And learning to take them with you, noticing how you get caught in the struggle. So, do you have a personal experience or that you're willing to share, maybe why you became a psychologist in the first place? I could certainly tell you that I often share that my autopilot way of being is I get really excited about something, and then I get eager about it, and then I start to get anxious about it happening the way I want it to happen, and then I start to get frustrated, and then I get really tight and fused and not my best self. And then I get tired, I burn out, and I start over again. So my work is in that space between excited and sort of anxious and stressed and tense, and I'm always sort of working in that space.
In terms of the skills, I think a lot about diffusion, which we've been talking about, and not getting too hooked into some of my thoughts that can get me really carried away, that can amp up anger, in particular, trying to really practice stepping back from that, which is a challenge because you get hooked over and over and over again. I think especially with an emotion like anger, there's something about it that's almost a little bit addictive.
Totally.
Yeah. And so kind of trying to unhook myself from that, trying to move into my body, getting out of my head and into my body and into my emotions, particularly of hurt or sadness or loss. I think that that's maybe one of the most important kind of skills that I've learned, in addition to really truly accepting my emotions, validating them, and bringing compassion to them, which is one of the things that I've really been encouraging people to do, especially during this really difficult time. I think that the more difficulties there are, the more of a need we have for compassion for ourselves and our experience.
Yeah. I have two questions. So one is, I highlighted that for both of us because another great when I looked at the common elements of these mindfulness therapies, and one of those common elements is this normalization, right? This idea that what we're talking about here, we have to do it too. And if we don't do it, then we're no good teaching it. So we're all in the soup together, and there's definitely no judgment in this work, because if you're a human, it applies to everybody.
But for the most part, I do it informally. And really, it's kind of just like a letting go of the judgment. I think I used to have a lot more judgment about my emotions and about my experience. And I hear people talk about this now too, that like they feel guilty for whatever their experience is. So say that they're, not as impacted. Maybe they're a college student who's moved home and they're not experiencing some of the interpersonal stress that was showing up, and they have a lot more stability and they're doing better. They might express guilt, for their experience being
I've heard
what
that
it
a
is.
lot from young people too.
Yeah. And I want people to get rid of their shame,
But that's really important, right? But shame, and I've been meaning to write something about it. Shame is just another spice in the recipe of emotions that we all have. And so we have to be careful about getting rid of shame too, right? So it's maybe the meaning or defusing from the meaning of shame, right? Because I call it like the shame bomb. When someone highlights that I'm getting into aggro fielding mode, it's like, hello, shame. Okay, I can take you with me. We have to be careful because if we're not willing to have shame, then that can cascade into unwillingness to have the rest of the emotional pool. And that ties into, that's, and I think I have to do a little lit review on this, but I think that that's absolutely true. If we're saying willingness, openness, acceptance, emotions are part of your internal here and now experience and don't represent who you are, then shame's in there too.
That's true, right? So I think what I mean when I say I want people to get rid of their shame is really their judgment about their experience,
exactly.
Right? That like they don't need to feel badly about themselves for whatever their experience is, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. That like you're saying, it's all welcome. It's all a part of the human experience, and they don't need to judge themselves harshly for that.
Right, or notice the judging and the step, and you just keep stepping. When I first started, I developed this expression. It's like we are a conscious container. We're a big bowl. Right? You are the bowl, and your thoughts and emotions and physical sensations and the noticing, the judging, that's just more stuff in the bowl, right? And that's really what we're after, is just holding all of that in the most compassionate, kind, reparenting kind of a way. And that is what is so fulfilling about this work for ourselves, for helping other people walk their journey. I also like just the simple Kristen Neff self-compassion exercises. For those of you watching, you can find a position that works well for you, but there are 3 components to self-compassion. There's the physical touch, there's the gentle and warm voice tone, and a little, as odd as it feels, a little cooing in your voice. So, just kind of talking like that. And she recommends either 2 hands on your chest like this. If you want to at home, you can try it for yourself. Or you can give yourself a gentle hug. Or I was joking with someone, touch your face, but make sure your hands have been washed first. Or the one I like is fist and hand over fist for a little bit of an empowering feeling.
Yeah, so I like that.
Just take one of those positions, when you're feeling it, and go. And another great tip is label. Just find the word. Labeling your emotion is like the coolest thing. In neuroscience and MRI research, they've found how it really starts to downregulate the emotion and soothe it and balm it a little bit. So those are some
simple practices that are so powerful, right?
Why I like the bodily kinds of things is because when you take a physical act of commitment, even if it's, willingness hands from DBT, opening your hands and lowering your shoulders, you've made a physical commitment. And it reminds you that, yes, I'm open to this emotional experience. I'm practicing right now. I'm not getting, fused and locked in with this thing.
I think another really empowering thing is committing to their values, right? Really figuring out what that looks for them, like during this time, and that question that you kind of posed to the viewers.
I wonder if your book could help them with that.
It could potentially.
Either one of our books. And where can they find your book?
Yeah, so it's available bookstores nationwide. It's available on Amazon, and it's actually, I think, freely available through Audible and through Kindle, if those are things that you subscribe to. it is kind of a little bit more of a workbook. So you might be interested in actually having it as a paper book, but that's something that you could potentially do during this time to help you navigate this experience and figure out, yeah, how can you diffuse from some of your thoughts? How can you practice acceptance of your feelings? How can you figure out kind of the commitments that you can make during this time?
Remind us the title of the book before I move to something else real quick.
So the title of the book, it's Reclaim Your Life, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy in 7 Weeks.
Excellent. Ava, hi Ava, thank you for joining us. She was asking about strategies for structuring time, going from work to working at home. It's funny you should ask that. I actually did a segment on the news about that. I have some suggestions. Do you have any in particular, Carissa?
Yeah. In terms of like more practical things like that, I've been suggesting that people kind of mirror, and it's going to look a little bit different, of course, but try to mirror what their schedule was like beforehand. There's going to be some adjustments, but it's really simple things again, like showering, having a start time, changing out of your pajamas.
Exactly what I said. I know, and it's so easy to the less you have on that calendar, the easier it is to, just like before you know it, it's 4:00.
Because one of the things that seems like people will often, I'm guilty of this sometimes, and I am exercising and meditating, which I'm recommending to my clients as well, but checking the news first thing when they wake up or before they go to bed.
Maybe not.
Thing to do right now. So also I've been encouraging people to try to limit their exposure to the media if possible.
It's really a test of discipline, right? But I use a very helpful acronym, and it really keeps us anchored around here, and it's called Skillful Means, MEANS, and we added an S for stay at home, but it's meditate, exercise, abstain from alcohol, nutritious foods, and sleep. And every day we'll kind of go like, well, we got 3 out of 5, but it keeps us, it's a very simple little Fitbit for yourself, for your emotional self-care kind of thing.
That, right? And I think so many people are struggling right now with substance abuse, which is, I think topic. Part of that is because when people have issues with addiction, it's often because they have trouble being alone with themselves. And I've had some clients that have really struggled with the social distancing part of that and not necessarily adhering to that because of the difficulties being alone with themselves. But yeah, that's so important. I love the acronym that you guys came up with. Yeah, that's also a socioeconomic status issue too, because a lot of the AA meetings and things like that, they've gone online, but like not everybody is going to have access to that. So they've lost their support, and they maybe don't have the tools of like acceptance, mindfulness, compassion to help them learn how to be alone. Yeah, it's a very challenging time for a lot of people.
So we're all in an unrelenting crisis right now. And so and maybe it's my bias, but I think people need a little bit more containment, things to not be so flooded with their emotions right now. And that's where sensory things like hot baths, there's a trick called the ice cube trick. I don't know if I'm not sure if so when you take a bath, if you're having a panic attack, anybody, and you really can't seem to reground yourself, either throw yourself in the shower and go hot, cold, or go and grab some frozen food or ice and throw it on your forehead, hold your breath for 30 seconds, and that will hack into your biology so you can at least get a little space between. So I think that in your own world out there, think about, your day to day. Am I more stressed? Do I need to do some sensory things? Take a hot bath, take a shower, maybe do some stretching, some physical stretching, things like that. And then there are days where you have free time and you're feeling balanced, and then you can start doing more of your values work and asking yourself, how can I reevaluate the path I'm on, and is this consistent with the person I want to walk through this as?
People, a lot of people are describing a lot of ups and downs during this time. Like sometimes they're feeling okay, and sometimes that's not available to them, and they're just feeling very scared or hopeless, and kind of just like riding the waves and asking themselves again with that compassionate approach, like what they're most needing. And if they're feeling in crisis, like maybe they're needing something to ground themselves, and they're not able to kind of, live out their values and engage in these commitments that we've been talking, and that's okay. And they can kind of, when that's available to them, maybe redirect their attention. But to just take care of themselves as best as they can with whatever is available to them during this time.
Yeah, that's what DBT calls distress tolerance, getting through a crisis without making it worse.
Mhm.
So, all right. Thank you so much, Carissa. This has been really fun. And I hope people found it helpful. Carissa, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
They can find me on my website. So if you Google me, or the address is just www.carissagustafson.com.
Excellent. And your social media?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I have a YouTube channel, and the videos that I mentioned, I'm hoping to be able to post them there somewhat soon. But all that you can kind of find through my website as well.
Awesome. Awesome. I think we covered all our topics. Excellent.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're super welcome. All right. Speak soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.